Good morning, all. I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of young professional group of BCS Sri Lanka section. Sometimes you may be already aware, we do lots of initiatives to support Sri Lanka young ICT professionals to get their careers enhanced and engaged. Today, we have an interesting panel that are really passionate and has quite a bit of experience on the topic we are going to discuss today. While welcoming you all, let me introduce the panelists today. We have Mr. Nuwan Weerasinghe, a senior manager from Zone 24/7, who has vast experience on application of AI technologies in practice. Welcome, Nuwan.
Thank you.
Then we have Mr. Nuwan Senaratna, who is a scientist and passionate individual working on AI area. He is also the founder of Computer Labs Incorporation. Welcome, Nuwan, on board.
Hi.
Yes, we have female representation today. One with the gamut of experience and exposure on research with world-recognized bodies. We welcome Ms. Dilrukshi Gamage, who is the chairperson of Special Interest Group on Computer Interaction, Sri Lanka.
Hello.
Hello. So it's glad to see we have considerable participation for this session. We also have people who will be joining through the Facebook as well. We have a couple of rounds of discussion and we'll have Q&A also. So you can submit your questions through the chat to the panelists. If you want to specify your question for a specified person in the panel, then you can write it with his or her name. So let's move on. To begin with, let me ask from Mr. Nuwan Weerasinghe, what is the potential of AI service for developing countries like Sri Lanka?
Yeah, yes. Mihiri, I hope you can hear my voice clearly.
Yes.
First, thanks for the BCS YPG for organizing this event today. And at the same time, I would like to welcome everyone who has joined this session today, this morning. So to provide a bit of context to what you just asked, as you know, like the promise of AI and of course then greater AI as a service is what we call as its ability to augment human capability. Because a lot of people think that it is about replacing humans, but rather its true potential is to be a complementing capability and an augmenting capability. And but however, unfortunately, especially for countries like us, this was beyond our capabilities for some time, and I think it is quite right to say that AI being offered as a service is one of the reasons why countries like us can also look forward to benefiting from something like this now. I mean, all this time, this was a technology which was quite cost prohibitive for various reasons. And among that, I would say one of the things is, of course, the first thing to start with is always data. And as you would know, like, for example, if you take Sri Lanka right now, it is now only we are trying to collect people's data into a common platform, you know, for information purposes. So we have a lot to do on that front even now. So we are getting there. And once so collecting that information, the data itself is a very expensive thing. Takes time and effort. Then the infrastructure required, you know, to process vast amounts of data. So that costs quite a lot. But luckily, because of this whole concept of AI as a service, that is not the case anymore, truly, if you look at it. And then once you have the infrastructure and the people, then you need the experts to work on these things. The AI minds, the people with the right skills, and they are also expensive. And they are some of the world's, they are short demand. I think that's the right thing to say. So these things makes this, made it earlier something which was very cost prohibitive, but not anymore. So as we are aware of software as a service, so here also we are leveraging the fact that the huge initial investment which is being put in to build these systems can be effectively spread across an unknown number of people, users, organizations, countries, so that we are basically bringing in the economies of scale factor to reduce the cost of offering AI for organizations, individuals, businesses, countries. So that is the promise. And if I highlight why AI would be very significant for a country like Sri Lanka, I would like to bring just one main factor. We know already, right? AI is used across many areas. It can be manufacturing, healthcare, education, energy, agriculture. A lot of use cases can be discussed. But all of these contribute towards one thing. And I think it is quite right to say that thing could be our competitiveness when you compare with other countries as a nation. So national competitiveness is something which something like AI can really help us to leapfrog as a country. So that is the greatest potential I see. And if I may share my screen for a moment, I will show you a quick graph just to prove my point here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So here, this is the World Economic Forum ranking of countries by global competitiveness. You can see Sri Lanka is 84th, right, out of 141. And the to get to leapfrog our country, our economy, our nation, our society to levels which was not possible before. And AI as a service can contribute in a greater way towards achieving this particular aspect. And this is probably the greatest promise. The fact that we have missed so many opportunities earlier to uplift our country, economy, and the standard of living. Probably something which is quite promising, not just for individuals, for industry, for government, and across many sectors and areas to actively evaluate and consider. Mihiri. Yeah. If there are any questions, yeah, you can ask, but I will be there.
Thank you, Nuwan. That's a really good start we had. Being more into the technical stuff of this AI mechanism, Nuwan Senaratna. So how does AI work and how might it add value to the business?
Yeah, so AI has quite a long history. I think it started kind of around World War II, so it's quite old. And throughout AI, the history of AI, it has been difficult to exactly define what it is. For many people, it has been many things. Earlier on, people were trying to mimic kind of human brains. And so it has evolved into kind of many different types of things. I think most recently, AI seems to have converged to one fairly dominant area. And that dominant area is how do you make use of very large quantities of data. So in this definition of AI has kind of converged with processing big data. It has also converged with kind of techniques for processing big data like deep learning. And also there's increasing convergence between AI and things like statistical machine learning. So I think to answer your question, I will use the definition. Okay, what is AI? AI is how do you make use of kind of very large quantities of data. And in the last 10 to 20 years, that process has accelerated, driven by two things. One is advances in hardware for actually processing data. 30 years ago, for example, the techniques behind deep learning were well known, but you couldn't actually do much with it because we didn't have the hardware capable of processing data in those kind of quantities. The other advance has been also the sources of data. Advances like the internet itself, there's a huge amount of data kind of collected on the internet kind of every second. And also advances like the Internet of Things, the ability to kind of have sensors on devices and kind of collect data through those means. So with this explosion of data now, not only do you have hardware that can process data, you actually have data which you can process data with. So for me, AI is how is this process by which you kind of make use of very large amounts of data. More from a practical point of view, for me, it means, okay, how do you process large amounts of data to solve viable business problems? I mean, there's no point in kind of playing around with a lot of data if you're not going to solve real problems based on that. So for me, I would add on that piece. So using large amounts of data, you solve real business problems. And kind of connecting it back with kind of the topic of today, AI as a service, you have various possibilities of building AI services that try to solve that problem. So that's my take on your question.
That's great. The questions you can post through the chat, as I said. So everyone in the audience, you can post your questions through the chat, so we can take and direct it to the panelists. Dilrukshi, so can you tell us what are your thoughts on implications of AI as service and its futuristic goals?
Thanks, Mihiri. Hi. Before I tell the implications, maybe I should make a point of my background so that you will see how do I see the implications from my perspective. So I'm a researcher who's doing research on human-computer interactions. So I do look at how people work through the computers. So it's mostly the developing systems and their experience. So AI will bring a lot of services, which is based on maybe somebody's developing applications that people can use. So when you look at implications, what AI does to the society, that's what we as humans, or like we as a society, should be looking at, in my perspective. Say, for example, AI, actually Nuwan Senaratna did quite a ground to that. So I mean, if there's no, he mentioned, like, if you have to make sure that your applications are usable and it does something that's really useful to the society. So when I say that AI can be developed in few domains: healthcare, medicine, education, travel, and a lot of areas. But AI can be used as against the humanity as well. That's the that's the thought that we all should be aware of. For example, I necessarily don't want to point out some of the applications or the capabilities, but few examples or few services that we can think of recently built a lot of contradictory ideas. For example, AI surveillances that we see in the Hong Kong, where people protest that they should not be monitored because they don't, the privacy being violated, or that's the perspective. And the other one is that the policy levels, have we developed our policies, legal systems to, confront all the causes that could come up with this AI, use of AI applications. For example, I don't know, maybe let's say that you got accident via auto-driven cars. So who's to be blamed? Whether the algorithm or the company who made the car or company who built the AI system to the car. So there's a lot of frameworks and the stakeholders coming into this picture, which has not been theoretized yet, as at the moment it's still developing. It's a huge. I'm not saying I can't be very pessimistic, but I'm really cautious, and I want the general people like us, to be cautious on the applications and the services that we use daily. Say, for example, I'm completely fine. Let's say that you have an AI application where you upload your X-ray, and then the application service will give you a diagnosis of whatever. But let's say that your recent contradictory application I would share, if you know, there's a company called Computer Vision, Clearview.ai, which has many talks about, and they have an application service where they sell to the law and enforcement, for example, police department in US. So there's a huge debate on whether should that kind of services can be given by a company, or like what are the implications. What the company does is, like, when you upload your face, image of your face, it will go through their database and give all the records of your internet activities, or anywhere in the internet will be rendered. So let's say that I was in the Twitter, and once I was public, but later I got private. I changed my setting into private, but still that data will be collected. So these are the gray areas that might come in the long run of when people used to build a lot of applications. So maybe we'll talk more in the long run. Before that, I want to emphasize another a great example, or like the community of people who are looking at this kind of perspective. One girl called Joy Bulawani. I'll paste those links in the chat window later. You should look at the way they're trying to, fight against the algorithms which we can't see from the applications, which could be biased. So she's Joy Bulawani is a Ghanaian researcher from MIT Media Lab. She's Black, and the Amazon recognition, or the recognition applications in the Amazon quite often mistakenly recognize her visual as an A because she's Black, and the data was used to train these systems being biased on mainly a narrow data set, or mainly white males. So it's really when it comes to development of applications, we have to make sure that the data is unbiased. So how do we make sure those things? So there's a lot of things that we need to understand before an application level come to a general practice. So that's my takeaway from the implications.
Interesting fact, Dilrukshi. So we have a question from audience. So maybe I can put it to all panelists. So is there any industries who are currently using AI in Sri Lanka, especially in manufacturing industries? Because we are still in industry 3.0 and little by little we are moving towards industry 4.0.
Yeah. Mihiri, I think I can add few things on that. I'll give a bit of context and background again. Industry 4.0, I mean, if you really think of it, it's not really revolutionary, but it's rather, I would say it's evolutionary. And the change has been significantly moving away from like what we consider as industrial automation, moving gradually, I mean, reducing just their dependency on pure industrial automation, but then bringing in more intelligence from AI-based applications. That's what's happening. So I'll give you a classic, I mean, I'll take some examples and explain this, because this is something actually we are involved, even in Sri Lanka, doing this. I'll take some, try to take some examples without mentioning any specific organization names. Now, in order for this to happen, we need data, and we need lots of data. Now some of this data is already in some structured format, maybe in a relational database, in somewhere you can directly use it. But also most of the data, which especially in an environment like manufacturing, most of that data is not really available, and you need to introduce mechanisms to capture them. So for that, then you need to bring in other capabilities, things like IoT, Internet of Things. Now that's where you would go into introducing IoT sensors sometimes, and sometimes it could be cameras. Now you need various tactics to capture information. So I mean, in a way, if you think of it, it's like sensing the environment. You need ways to sense, right? I mean, like our 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, like that. So you need sensing mechanisms. Now these places, what they're trying to do is they have some structured data. They are capturing data, maybe from, as I said, from various IoT mechanisms. They bring them to some central location, and now they have to do what we call as making sense of data. Now they have collected vast amounts of data. Now how do you make sense of it? That is the next challenge. And for that you have to build infrastructure. As I said earlier, you need the right kinds of experts, and that's after that you need to act upon the data. Now if it is a typical information system, this could be a report, this could be some function, something like the dashboard, ways you get information. But in a manufacturing environment, it goes beyond that. Okay, actions can be, I mean, so on one side you have sensors, then there's a need for actuators. So maybe as a result of processing that information, you automatically start a particular process, or shut down a process, or various actions can be triggered. Maybe those actions not just limit to this particular location, but cascade through a supply chain, so that it goes from manufacturing to earlier stages, upstream supply chain activities. So since you are, I mean, I saw there are questions whether Sri Lanka is using it. Yes, Sri Lankan manufacturing industry already uses AI. Now, one of the best examples I can give you, and where we are personally involved, is garment manufacturing, because as you know, Sri Lankan garment industry is so critical for the local economy, and employees almost maybe more than 500,000 people in this country. It's significant, and we know with this COVID-19 situation, like what they are going through, and the impact on the overall economy, because that industry is not functioning. But way before this situation, we were having significant challenges. And one of the challenges is cost of operation. Because Sri Lanka faces significant challenge from countries like China, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, who are much less cost destinations. And Sri Lanka's advantage has been always like a high quality, good product. We have good brand name and also our skilled labor. But what we are seeing is this advantage is diminishing. This is not sustainable in the long run. And that's where some of Sri Lankan really well reputed, respected garment manufacturing entities looked into how certain elements of machine learning, whether that can be employed in looking into some really painful problem areas. Like I'll give some classic examples. Now, a good example is this. I mean, in this industry, labor turnover is something very significant. Like there are well understood patterns in this industry about when people join, when people leave, and it's a very interesting thing to understand the whole scenario of the how labor respond in the garment industry. And so like across the industry, there's a huge problem on absenteeism. People sometimes don't necessarily inform anyone or put into a system that, hey, I'm not coming tomorrow. So suddenly in the morning, so there is a manufacturing process and people come in the morning and you find some critical jobs people are missing. And there is, I mean, now every morning, manufacturing line supervisors, production managers struggle for a good maybe 1 to 2 hours just to figure out how am I going to slot in people for this particular tasks to perform tasks. People have not come to work. Now, this was a problem we studied for some time, and we saw that certain predictive analytics can help, and to complement that, of course, there can be certain prescriptive analytics can also come into play. So these companies they were quite interested to see whether certain predictive models can be built in order to look into absenteeism. And then the other thing is whether based on that information, when we get the real people count, whether we can look into optimal ways of using these people or prescribing ways to the business. These are the people you have. These are their skill set. This is what they have done in the past. Look at all that information and help the business come up with an optimal way of allocating people to perform certain tasks. Now, and we have estimated that this can significantly reduce that early morning waste and loss in production hours by having this information being readily made available to production planners. Now, this would be quite difficult to achieve, like with a traditional, more of a traditional approach. But the good thing is many of these organizations have captured data for a long time, not necessarily in a structured format. Some were sort of like semi-structured, I would say. But the fact that they had the data and those data were just sitting there and that they were not really doing much with that data meant that they always had the opportunity to do something with it, but it was just overlooked. So this was one area, but also we were actively looking into areas where because there are many other areas in terms of improving production quality, giving them more predictability into supply relations when they get goods and things like that. Whether we can use AI and machine learning techniques to understand, because like sometimes raw material quality varies, and today checking raw material is quite a tedious process. It's very dependent on humans, and all these inefficiencies adds to ultimately to the product cost, and also extends our ability, extends the duration taken to provide a finished good to the market. So So in short, to answer that question, yes. I mean, these are some of the examples I know personally, but I let my other colleagues in the panel to answer whether they know of any such other instances too, and also about and the potential benefits they were looking into. This is the most important thing. So what were they trying to earn through this? And of course, one of the main things was productivity, because many of you would know how garment industry measure because they go by minute values. That's how they go, the production capacity. They don't say by head count, they say go by minute values. So so the industry, I mean, if they can pack more work into a minute, that improves their entire productivity, and that helps our industry to go up. So that is where the productivity was, of course, the first thing. Second thing is reducing cost, because when you eliminate all these unnecessary waste in the process, that really helps, and of course leads to higher quality products. That has to be mentioned, because you make informed decisions based on data, objective data, information. And another very important thing, when you bring this level of intelligence to manufacturing, you reduce the rigidity of the process. Because right now, you see with COVID-19, right? I mean, how difficult it is for our manufacturers to move into another product. It's very costly, because their structures their systems are in place to do something in a particular way. And when something quickly goes wrong or changes, they can't be flexible. It takes a lot of time and effort to adapt to developing situations. So so that ability to adapt fast is something which they can gain when they have that level of information. And then, of course, something I can think is ultimately this would lead into better customer satisfaction and things like that. But these are all connected. So I think that's a very short, probably answer. If there are any questions, I'll take later.
Thank you, Nuwan. So I see questions are piling up, so we'll take them. So keep it going.
I see a question in banking and finance, possible areas. Does anybody want to take on that? I want to share some of the experiences that, the question is like how AI is possible in banking and finance as a service. It's limitless, in my opinion, because take, for example, in Sri Lanka, when you talk about the era of banking, banks always believe that we should come to their bank and do the services, or get their services. But with the AI, they should, this whole, paradigm of banking, going to a bank should change. And the way that we, interact with the banking systems should trigger them data so that they could possibly, give us solutions. Say, for example, I transfer, or I have an account, personal account, and suddenly I got a lot of money. I don't know, let's assume hypothetically like that. And then the bank should be able to, find that and see the prospect of that. See, now that you have this much this much of credit, why don't you think about, this home loan plan, your child, education. So these are the predictors that, it all depends on the data, but the opportunities that you could trigger from the interactions or the transactions happen through the banking systems are limitless. I don't know. When you go to a personal banking assistant or in front of the bank, it's such a chaos to get information from them, right? What if the bank give us information based on our behavior? That's one of the key things that I would envision in the future, especially in the Sri Lankan banking sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Dilrukshi. So I think being more into practicing and into experience of this AI technologies, product development. So, Nuwan, Senaratna, I think you have a vast experience and you have engagement with this over there. And how do you different this AI product development with the general software development?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So our topic is AI as a service, and maybe I'll kind of go into AI product development by contrasting it with sort of general software development and software as a service. So as you all know, software as a service is when you have some software product on the cloud and customers can access it usually via the internet, and then they pay for it. There is some subscription model or something like that. And software as a service would satisfy some customer need, and it's very broad. It can focus on very specific areas like banking. We heard about manufacturing, garment sector earlier, so very specific services. Or it could be something like what we're using now, Zoom, which almost anyone can use. So that's software as a service. AI as a service follows the same pattern, as in it's usually on the cloud, it satisfies some need, people pay for it, but of course the services are AI specific. So you can think of this at sort of multiple layers because AI is a very sort of broad area. Right at the bottom, you could think of it as services that provide hardware support for AI. So you need to train models, you need to store data. Okay, what is the hardware for that? And so you got a kind of a broad range of products that do that. Then slightly above the hardware, you can see the most fundamental AI software. So for example, the algorithms that run deep learning, for example, if you want to train a deep learning pipeline, there are a bunch of software products out there. And then you can also use services that kind of expose this. So you can train your models using an AI service. So you got that software layer. Then on top of that, you got slightly, so now we are getting away from algorithms to more like products. So if you take something like translation or object detection, those are products built on top of AI. So now you've started to get closer to kind of like an actual use case. But let's say you're a bank and you have all your kind of, you have your websites in one language. You could use a translation product to translate, say, from English to Sinhala or Tamil. So that's okay. You're getting closer and closer to kind of like a human use case, and you can think of even more kind of human use cases on top of that. So some of the examples that we heard today, like predicting churn or turnover in a factory, or a bank trying to, say, predict fraud or who the best customers are, now you're getting very close to a sort of application. So you can think of AI as a service across all those layers. So let me end with one related point. Your question was around, okay, how do we compare software development to AI development? Let me anchor on success, right? So success, we are all interested in success. And so let me compare what success looks like in AI product development to how success looks like in general software development. So generally, let's say you have software, some software as a service product. To me, to succeed, you need two things. One is differentiation. So if someone else can copy what you're doing very easily, then you're not going to succeed. Someone else will copy it and probably do it better, and then you're out. So one is differentiation. The other is you need to be able to scale. So the general motto in software as a service is you like build it once and then sell it many times. So if you can't scale it, also it's not going to work. So I think we can look at AI also through these two lenses. On the first piece, differentiation. So can you differentiate based on hardware? Not really, because the hardware is available out there. You can just buy it. But on the other hand, if you already have a lot of hardware, you have some advantage, which is why companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook, who have large amounts of hardware already in data centers and so on, have an advantage. With software, you have almost no advantage because a lot of the fundamental AI kind of software is available out there, either in sort of open source projects or in things like kind of research papers and things like that. If you want to know about deep learning, the latest stuff, you can all read it all. It's all out there. I think the real big differentiator in AI is data, because that is something that people can kind of restrict and not share. And if you look at the AI scape, like a lot of people are talking about the democratization of AI, because like anyone can take a Coursera course or kind of whatever and learn AI. That is true if you talk about algorithms and software. If you look at data, it's not democratic at all. And I would argue probably about 90% of the world's data is controlled by maybe 20 entities, all big corporations or big governments. Dilrukshi was talking about Hong Kong a while ago. That's the example. It's a lot of data concentrated in the hands of like one entity. So I think if you are to succeed at AI as a service, data is probably your advantage. And of course, hardware and software might help, but I think if you want to have a differentiated product, you need to have differentiated data. So that is one reason why actually AI as a service is harder than software as a service. While with software as a service, your differentiation could be even an idea. And then no one knows about that core idea and you're okay. But with data, it's a little bit difficult. There's a similar problem with scaling as well. So something that software as a service people find out is like, for example, if you take what we're using, Zoom, almost everyone has the same way of using Zoom. It's very similar. You might have small variations, like we are using a variation at the moment, Zoom optimized for like a kind of a conference or a talk as opposed to like a meeting, but it's mostly the same. It's 99% the same actually. This is not really the case with AI because a lot of customization is needed. So a pattern that you see all the time is, say, a company builds an AI as a service product, then sells it to a customer, and then sells it to another customer. And then they find that, okay, they're having a few customers. Then they find out that the first customer needs a lot of customization, because AI is one of those things where you need to customize it in a very detailed way to the customer's specific need. So then they figure out they need to actually go back. They might need to meet the customer. They need to go and dig deeper into the data. And suddenly, you thought you were selling an AI product when it starts looking more like an AI service, where you're selling like an AI consulting service, because you need to spend a lot of people time understanding the product. So I think that's the other point, in that AI as a service scales quite well at the lower levels. So for example, if your service is GPU power or deep learning pipelines, that scales quite well because everyone sort of uses the same thing. And you have Amazon, Google, Microsoft, a bunch of dominant players have like really secured that area. The moment you go higher up and get closer and closer to applications, it scales less well because each use case is quite different. So you can't build once and sell many times. You need to build. You might be able to build once, but then you need to make various customizations before you sell it. So I think those are the differences between AI product development and AI software development and general software development, and also some of the differences between software as a service and AI as a service.
Thank you, Nuwan. So it's more about the data is being used, like how these, like the privacy aspect of this personal data is being used. So I think we have a question also related to that. So AI service providers like mobile operators, they can profile the customer data based on, for example, the short message services that they get. Or if I search in Google something, then next day onward, I'm receiving ads pertinent to my search. So using this personalized data for these AI services. So what is the ethical use of that, and how this should be handled? Maybe the question is for all the panelists who wish to answer.
I'll take that because it's actually a gray area. There's no like a logical gate. This is not ethical and this is ethical. For example, say Google, which has a lot of services and they, you know, continuously keep crawling most of the data, because we tend to be using most of the services by them, and then I think as part of the, for example, Facebook, they acquire many other services companies so that they could be the giant who's behind the data. So for example, if a bank is handling our customer data, that's the bank right? Because we have given the right to the bank, but the bank doesn't have the right to share other information with another bank, but the bank can use their data to give us a better service. So there's no ethical issue in that. You all agree? I hope you agree with me, because we give the consent to, you know, acquire, and our transaction data also, they're legal, or like, you know, we are in a partnership with them. So giving the services for us through that bank, I don't see a problem. But the moment they share our services with another bank, then the problem comes. Say, for example, your bank is merged to another bank. I mean, even if you don't like or not, the banks are, you know, alliance together, and they have the legal right to practice with your data. So ethical implications are more, you know, it's all moral, that we have to train our future researchers plus the developers. I say particularly for software engineers and the people who are really keen on building these services out of these data, to question before they build up solutions, so that they have, you know, at least they have the moral, you know, thinking. Let's say that I'm building this with my, you know, I don't have any black, you know, thoughts in my mind that the services that I'm offering is for humanity, or, you know, the, you know, uplifting of human nature. So it's about the state of mind, or the framework that we have already seen in practice state. It could change if many of them say that, you know, if it being a practice, then it would be changed from the ethical perspective. I don't know, anybody else?
I could add a couple of points to that. One is, so talking about ethics, it's difficult to talk about ethics without talking about law, because the two go hand in hand. Yeah, usually kind of the law follows ethics. The laws are based on ethics usually. And so I think one big gap is not just in Sri Lanka, but in many countries, the law around data protection and privacy, many places don't have any law. And in other places, it's still in the process. I think in Sri Lanka, it's in the process of being drafted. I think we are very close, but it's still not completely finished. So I think that's the important thing, because you can't really blame, say, a bank for kind of looking at private data if the law doesn't prevent them from doing that. I think so. It's the law which kind of sets the basic standard. And kind of hand in hand with the law, there has to be also the enforcement part. Like you won't abuse if there's a punishment kind of behind that. So I think in general, the legal system has been behind technology. Like technology goes into the future before everything else. And so the legal system is kind of following behind. If you've been following some of the goings on in the US, where Google, Facebook, some of the big companies have had to answer questions about how they use data. One example is like of the law being behind technology. So I think once that gap is filled, things will become much more normal. The other point I wanted to make in this is there is also a gap in technology itself. And what I mean by that is it's very, so far, it's quite difficult to make use of data without actually looking at the data. So if you want to build, say, a model based on data, you need to analyze the data and see, okay, what are the possibilities? But more recently, there have been some advances in technology where you can actually make use of data without seeing the data. So things like federated computing, kind of distributed machine learning. So for example, Apple has a bunch of machine learning models where the model actually runs on your phone. Your data doesn't leave your phone. So everything happens in your model, and only like a very small amount of data which can't identify you actually reaches Apple. Another area which I'm personally very interested in is called homomorphic encryption, where it's a type of encryption where you can encrypt the data completely, but then still run models and things like that on the data. So I think even the technology is behind technology in a certain way when it comes to kind of data privacy, and some of the latest kind of advances in technology will help with privacy and things like that. And I think once the law and the technology kind of recognize the implications of privacy, then it'll be more like the norm. Everyone, like say a junior software engineer working in a company, will naturally understand, okay, this is how I need to treat privacy, just as they know how to treat other things. So yeah.
Thank you. So
just one more point, because we talked about a lot of data in our applications. I'll just share one of the link that we recently I recently took part of the data talent hackathon. So the reason, or like the atmosphere that I want to emphasize, is that most of the research community, like researchers, like open researchers communities, they publish their data open so that people can get used, or develop things based on the thing, based on the data available publicly. For example, the hackathon was about what can we know about misinformation in COVID-19. So I just post a link which a bunch of resources which provide data free. So in the open science framework, there's if you type the open science framework, there's a there's a field in that framework which is open data, terabytes of data given free for people to make use. But it depends on the scenario that one will tell. Maybe sometimes the data may not suitable exactly 100% to your demand. That's the problem. But let's say that if you are building applications, for example, most of the time researchers, they publish their data set and the codings on the open science repos. For example, GitHub or IEEE has their own data, open data platforms where people can extract data easily.
interesting. So with the time constraint, let's move on with the final round of questions. So I see lots of questions there. So that's an interesting question. This is more into the technical stuff. So want to know the difference between ML or DL and AI. I have seen ML, DL, but no experience with AI. So a question from audience. Anyone?
I could take that if you like. Okay, so ML is machine learning. DL, I'm assuming, is deep learning, and then AI is artificial intelligence. So to define this, I think the easiest to, I'll go in the most detail to the most general. So deep learning is generally used to refer to a class of machine learning algorithms which use very large neural networks. So a neural network is a kind of algorithm which tries to mimic how the human brain works. It consists of neurons, but it's essentially, the mathematical explanation of it, it's sort of a function which can generalize to kind of any problem. So you can try and train any kind of model based on a deep learning network, because it is so complex. So that's what deep learning is. Then machine learning is kind of the superset. where, okay, machine learning is a collection of various kind of statistical algorithms which you can use to train a model based on data. That's where the learning comes. You add data and the model learns based on that. So even zooming further back, artificial intelligence is an even larger class of computing, which includes machine learning, but it also has things which are outside machine learning. So for example, there's a study of agents. Agents kind of try to identify kind of various entities interacting with themselves. So you could use like an agent model, for example, to try and predict how COVID is spread between people. You can consider a person as an agent, and you can model it that way. So having said that, while AI, ML, and deep learning are kind of very different, they also, people tend to talk about them as the same thing. So for example, deep learning tends to dominate a lot of AI conversation at the moment because it's like the coolest thing, and it's also used quite a lot. People tend to think of deep learning as AI, and sometimes as machine learning as AI, because machine learning tends to dominate AI. So these are different, but many people also talk of them as almost the same thing in many situations. Yeah, hope that answers the question.
Okay. So let's go with the other questions that. The question is to Nuwan Weerasinghe. So what is the difference between AI as service and AI?
Okay, so when we consider something as service, it's the same thing. Even I mean, if you take software or software as a service, when something is as a service, I'll talk about the very fundamental thing. When we want to offer this as this as a service, our idea is actually to make this available to a large pool of people, mainly with the objective of actually bringing down what we call as maybe the unit cost of accessing it or using it. So essentially, what's the thinking driving this is so like to make it available in a way where it becomes more. It will achieve economies of scale. That's the fundamental thinking. So because when you have invested in something to build, and if that initial investment is very high, like what I mean, like big companies like Google, Amazon, even Microsoft, some of these companies, even Oracle, Facebook, what they have done is they have invested massively both on hardware infrastructure and software infrastructure, and from the day dot, I'm sure like the thinking was to make it available to not just to selected people or entities or organizations, but to make it available mass scale, because that drives their larger business objectives too. So in that context, I mean, when you make something as a service, the thinking is actually to drive that level of consumption. So and the other thing is, when you make it as a service, you open up other opportunities for monetization rather than just AI versus AI as a service. So you provide that much more flexibility in terms of accessing something as a service. I hope if anyone else from the panel want to elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, let me take that from the example point of view. Say, for example, let's imagine that you build a application that will say the recent example of the X-ray. Say that you personally build a software or the AI model that will detect through your X-ray whether if there's an anomaly, let's say a broken leg or something, so that you have your applications with you. But let's say it's only for you, right? So let's say that you make it available as a service to everybody else, so that you have a front end so that anybody can upload their X-ray as to your interface, and then you will be taking and giving them the report. So you may charge or at some point that's the monetary value. So the service that you get from that X-ray, or like the mapping of the deep learning, whatever the AI solutions will be with the person who's building, but he's giving the services for monetary value. So that's one of the typical examples. I don't know whether if you got clear. I mean, clear examples are the Google for software as the services, but there are lots of AI as services coming up. And also, I think people who are using the services as example, for example, Amazon has a lot of frameworks which being given as a services, where they have three things called Amazon Recognition, where you can use images to recognize people. And then there's a Amazon service called Poly, where it's a text to speech interface. Now, I think most of the computer interfaces, when they read text, it's like a robotic, there's no pace, there's no punctuation. So the AI as a service used for the text to speech has a lot of humanistic feelings, like, there's a pose, there's a there's a, just like feeling of you talking to a robot will be model, so that makes more humanized feelings. And the other one is I think Lex, where it takes your natural language processing. Say, for example, if I want to talk to a device and the device has to act upon it, so sometimes your voices or your native languages doesn't take to that model. So the Amazon services, I shouldn't be taking Amazon at front, but there's a giant. So there's other services who are taking those giant services and giving other services as well. For example, let's say that if you have used Yelp is the restaurant management, the review system. They use a lot of services from the third parties of AI interfaces, so that they give better recommendations for us. So, and they give us the services. So it's about democratizing, but monetizing as well.
Interesting facts, Dilrukshi. So let's move on with the question set. So, Nuwan, Senaratna, how do you see a successful AI as a service, Sada?
Yeah, I kind of briefly touched on this earlier as well, but with any as a service software product, or any software as a service product, including AI as a service, success depends on it depends on differentiation. If you have a product which anyone else can build, then someone is going to copy it, and you won't have a business anymore. So that's the first one. The second one is scaling. So the motto is you build once, sell many times. So specifically with AI, to get the first one right, as I said earlier, data is probably the biggest differentiator. And two, there isn't a really good answer to the second question for types of AI as a service at a high level. So low-level AI as a service, things like hardware and kind of core algorithms, then everyone uses the same thing, so you can build once, sell many times. But I don't have a good answer to how you really scale really high-level AI, because every use case seems to be quite different. Yeah, so that's my answer.
So we'll take a question from audience. So that's a question related to the situation right now in the world. So there's a question related to COVID. So how AI can use to the situation, maybe to prevent or to reduce the spreading of this disease, or how AI can be used to the situation like this? The question is to all panelists. Anyone who want to answer?
I could take a shot at it. So as far as I understand, AI is used in a bunch of different places in the battle against COVID. So at one extreme, it is actually used in the search for a vaccine itself. One interesting use case is a sub part of AI called natural language processing, which Dilrukshi mentioned a while ago, where you're using AI systems to scan through large numbers of previous publications on antiviral drugs and vaccinations and trying to find patterns on what might work for the new coronavirus. So that's one extreme. Another extreme, which I understand is being used to some extent in Sri Lanka as well, is kind of like the basic question of what do you do. So essentially, what I mean by that is, do you lock down? Do you have curfew? Do you like restrict people from kind of meeting everyone else? And there, the logic is basically kind of given an individual what is their chance of being infected. And you can apply this even at a regional level. If you think of something as like a district or even a more detailed area like a Gramaniladari level, if there has been a case in that area, then the chances of the people around will be infected is increased. So you can build the AI models to try and predict this basic thing, like, okay, what is the chance of someone being infected? And then based on that, you can also try to make some nuanced decisions. Based on the output of the AI, you could kind of decide, okay, we need to hospitalize this person, or we need to quarantine this person, or we need to put the person in isolation or lockdown. One important caveat here is, I think many people have asked me the question, like, why can't we use deep learning to solve COVID? And I think an important thing to keep in mind is, like, deep learning is not like a silver bullet which kind of solves every problem, nor does it mean that other areas of AI are useless. So for example, NLP, which we spoke about earlier, has its own users. And sometimes it depends on how much data you have at the moment as well. So if you take Sri Lanka, I think we have something like 1,000 odd confirmed COVID cases and like only 9 confirmed deaths or something. So in statistical terms, these are like very small numbers, and there is no point in training a deep learning model to do any prediction on these small data sets. There are other techniques which are more suited for small data sets than deep learning. So I think it's also important not to get carried away with AI and saying, okay, it can solve any problem. There are other things you need to do for other situations. Yeah, that's my take on that.
Well, that's down to my perspective as well. So have a mindset of HCI perspective, so that you see the problem first and then think about the solutions. You don't think about the framework first and develop the questions or the problems. So have the design thinking mindset always will be the solution for the wicked problems. And apart from that, the COVID-19, I saw some of the research studies based on the mobility of your mobility data patterns. For example, I saw Google is always sharing their models, based on the mobility that people, they predict from the people. There's a likelihood that it will spread in this amount in this area. I saw really good examples with the visualizations as well. So that's one of the use cases that you can think of.
Thank you, Dilrukshi. So the next question is to Nuwan Weerasinghe. So there's a question regarding the cost involved in these AI solutions, especially for the countries like Sri Lanka. Does Sri Lankan companies can adapt with AI solution with the cost component of that? So this is relating to Sri Lankan context and how well we can go with the costing aspect as well.
Yeah.
One.
Yes. So as I said earlier, this was cost prohibitive earlier, and AI as a service is one approach which helps us to overcome that to a certain extent. And so if you think of it, infrastructure is one need. Of course, having the right data, collect mechanisms to collect data is another need. And then, of course, the cost of people, because usually people forget that you still need experts to build these systems, and they are rare. You don't find many, even in countries like US. If you go to LinkedIn and search, there are thousands of job opportunities which are not filled at all in areas like AI, machine learning, big data, data science. I mean, there's quite a shortage of qualified, skilled people. So all these things adds, and I would say some. I mean, it is not. I mean, sometimes Sri Lankan organizations can be at a disadvantage in getting access to this. But having said that, it depends on like what you are trying to do with it, and your clarity in terms of what you're trying to build. So if you have that idea in your head, I mean, measures can be taken to bring down the cost of what you're trying to build, because at the end of the day, cost is an outcome. It is not. I mean, cost is created by certain things which happens before that. So if you there are drivers of cost. So if you know what is driving cost, you can bring it down. Now, in AI, like now, one of the first things, I mean, not just with AI, with anything, first thing you are trying to understand is who's your customer, and that's always where it's going to start from. I mean, who's your customer, and the way you define your customer, especially, sometimes helps you to mitigate sometimes the cost involved with building these, especially these AI-based systems. I'll take an example. Now, we, for example, build some machine learning-based systems for retail industry. And when you say retail, there are so many categories of retail. You have fashion retail, you have consumer groceries and things like that. You have consumer electronics, then you might even have vehicle spare parts, and so many segments of retail industry. And now, if you're building a model targeting one, let's say, for example, one particular segment of retail industry, let's say fashion, okay? And if you want to take that product, let's say for consumer electronics, then there will be other costs involved with trying to take this model to another domain and another sector, and there would be additional effort in that. You might need to retrain, you might need more different data, and there will be effort involved with that. And so those things has to be considered when you say for a Sri Lankan business, what would be the cost. So cost can be planned and cost can be mitigated if you know what you're getting into, and of course other things, again, based on your platform or your application, are you going to deal with something like rich content? I mean, do you have video, audio, images? That takes that you need space for that, and that takes time. And in certain situations, even with AI applications, you still need humans, because example, these social media companies, they still need human moderators and reviewers to check the content. I mean, they don't rely 100% on AI to do that. And then even these things like these autonomous car companies, they need human operators to do that. And that is still part of the cost. That still matters. So these things matter when you try to understand your business model, when you try to monetize it, because sometimes you might not really think about these things. And I think Nuwan earlier probably maybe touched on this. Like sometimes there's effort if there are a lot of like things like edge cases, because you build something. I mean, even let's say if I take the example of two fashion retailers, there's no guarantee that something you have trained for one is going to ideally work as it is for the next one, and there will be effort when it comes to overcoming some of the edge cases, and that might take time for you to finish your engagement, whatever. So this all adds up to cost of doing this. So it is important to understand that at the end of the day, you need to have a way to recover and recover in a way which works for you as well as works for your customer. That's where the business model comes into the picture. So that's my take on it. And if anyone wants to add anything on top of that, I'll let. Mihiri, would that help? Or was it clear enough?
Yes, Nuwan. Anyone wants to add on that? Okay, so I think the question is related to the same as well. So I'm reading the question from audience. Enterprises face many challenges when you move on with new technologies, processes, budget and resources, knowledge, etc. How do you assess the readiness of AI as a service, which can be directly adopted in enterprise in Sri Lanka? Do we have players, technology, and environment? Else, what required to be done?
Shall I take that question, or would Dilrukshi or Nuwan want to go first?
Nuwan, go ahead. I think you can. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. So I think they might be answering the question in the wrong direction. So here, let me explain what I mean by that. So especially when students ask me, okay, how do I get started in AI? How do I learn AI? What technology should I use? What courses should I take? Those are the standard questions. And my reply is like, forget about the technology, forget about the courses, find a really interesting AI problem that you're really interested in. And so I recently met not even a university student, like I think it was an A-level student whose interesting AI problem is to translate every book and paper that's out there from English into Sinhala and Tamil. And that's actually like a great service if you can do that, because that's a huge gap. Language is a huge gap in Sri Lanka. But anyway, I think his case is very valuable because he has an interesting use case. The reason I mentioned that is many of our enterprises and organizations are also a lot like those students who are asking, okay, what technology should we use? Like what products are the best, stuff like that, without asking the more fundamental question, what is the nature of our business? How can AI solve problems that are actually in our business? So I would say, don't ask the question like what's out there, ask the question like what's inside your organization first. Like what are the key business problems that can be solved? Like what are the business problems that you need to solve? Never mind whether AI is going to solve it, and then go from there. I think there are so many problems out there. Nuwan W mentioned like a whole bunch of problems related to kind of government industries. I think people who are going to succeed in AI are those people who can translate or understand the actual internal businesses and figure out, okay, we have this data, what can we solve with this data? As opposed to looking at the outside and saying, okay, what are the cool new AI technologies that we should use? I think AI is a bit of a fad, so everyone wants to do AI, but it's not going to be of any use unless you kind of first understand the inside first.
Dilrukshi, do you want to add more to that? Or?
Yeah, that also, I mean, that's Nuwan Senaratna nailed it, actually. He nailed it, because very recently there was a conversation, and this is my personal view. Somebody called me suddenly, and they wanted to have a service from me because I'm in the open education, massive open online education sector, which is really booming these days. And suddenly, the conversation was like, oh, so how do you use AI into your research? And it's like it's almost like the fashion. It's not the problem that they are focusing, whether do you do AI in their solution. So it's fancy, right? Just want to point out that. So exactly that people need to change their mindset of what is surrounding, and then the way that they should approach the problem should change.
Yeah, and just to add to the same thing, Mihiri, there was another question I saw asking like, now there is a situation where we need to maintain some social distance, especially like customer facing situations like in tourism industry. So can you use technologies like this, to get the job done still, but while being safe. So yes, but it's again the way we look at it. Sometimes AI might be an overkill. That's what I think, because if you go into things like conversational interfaces, chatbots talking and all that, that yes, to a certain extent that's possible. But then again, looking at such an industry, they still expect that human touch. That's, if it is hospitality, to what extent can you achieve that with the technologies right now? I think that is something considering the service level also. So that would be something to think. But then again, if you just forget about the intelligence part, a simple kiosk or a touch interface and something you have in airports and you do things, all the time, could still work. So on a lobby, hotel lobby or something, where you enter and you register yourself, you do the needful, simple touch interface. No fancy tech. So that is also one way to look at it. So but sometimes it is based on the use case, definitely, and whether customer puts a value in that. How does the customer perceive? Is the perception that this is really value adding, or is it just, yeah, you get my point.
Thanks, Nuwan. So I think with the time constraint, let's move on with the final question. As I said, we have considerable members with us, and there are some beginners who are actually sometimes not with the information technology also, maybe with some other areas, but they are really interested in AI. Then how these beginners can enter into this? If they are interested in AI, where do they begin with? And any guidance that as expert, if you can provide them?
Okay, I'll take that and ride off with my thoughts as well, because we have not the time. So, as general audience who are really novice to these technologies, these fancy terms, sometimes you may get lost where to begin. I might personally myself is not an expert in machine learning, AI at all. So, but I developed my interest because the information that I see every day is really important, that we as general public need to know these services, because at the end of the day, we are the people who are going to use these services. So in terms of, let's say that, what are the harms, what are the important things? As a student, I guess most of the members are students. There are lots of communities out there in Sri Lanka that have meetups, webinars like this, not just listen to the people, talk that what we do, but have also a part of interactions with the community who's doing these kind of things, so that what are the technologies to be looked, be yourself, engage with people who are doing those researchers, plus, day-to-day activities, and also online, to get the fundamental knowledge, internet is the best resource. So keep your curiosity in your mind, and then look at the people who people talk about these terms, and go behind them and associate them. That's apprenticeship really important, so that you will get the background information, the tacit knowledge, what we say, when you take a definition, it's always there in the internet. But when tacit is the machang level information that you should know will be given to you by a person that you associate. With that, let me share you a recent, this post was shared in the Microsoft 2 days ago. because I'm so interested in the subject areas and the new technologies. This is really fancy. Cool. I mean, I saw some of the fancy backgrounds here. Nuwan is having a space. So Microsoft has come with a new technology, or like the AI tool that you can build your virtual still picture to a virtual, video. So it's like completely transforming you to a virtual video, so that you can easily deepfake the video. So most of that service, or the technology, was based on the published paper in CVPR. CVPR is a top tier conference for this kind of research area. So people are keen on what people do based on the conferences or the posts, the blogs. So keep your eyes open always and be vigilant to what you see as well, because internet is with a lot of misinformation. Train yourself to be critical and narrow down your problems, and to be associated with the people that you can grab most. That's my final thought.
Thank you, Dilrukshi. So to wind up this session, so please share your final thoughts with us.
Yeah, I'll say something quickly. I think because with AI and especially as a service, it gives an opportunity for because as I started saying, this gives us an opportunity, if we use it carefully and judiciously, to leapfrog. I think that's the potential. I mean, because at the end of the day, what we want is benefits for the people, for the society, especially considering Sri Lanka. So I think it's quite good to see the level of enthusiasm. I mean, if you consider especially university final year projects and things like that, there's a lot of enthusiasm around this topic. But at the same time, if we can convert that enthusiasm into products and services, which can take our country, our society to another level, where, as I said earlier, like if we can be a more competitive country in front of the rest of the world, so that we would at the end of the day enjoy a better quality of life and as a nation. So I think that's a good goal to strive towards. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nuwan.
Yep, maybe I'll enter on a couple of things as well. So most of what I said were either about businesses or people. So maybe I'll just zoom one level higher and kind of share some thoughts related to, I think Nuwan and Dilrukshi both mentioned things at a national level. So what could we do at a sort of a national level? I think the biggest problem in kind of both software engineering as a whole and kind of AI in particular, Nuwan touched on this as well, is a severe shortage of kind of human resources, like people who do AI. And so I think in Sri Lanka, we have this problem at a software engineering level as well, in that it's not easy to hire high quality software engineers because there is this kind of severe shortage. So for me, like one problem is to solve that shortage, which is to, I think the source of that is like there's a very small number of students studying the sciences in general. Yeah. So I think we have almost 10,000 schools, but I think only about 100 odd have succeeded in creating a science graduate ever. So I think that's a huge problem that we need to solve as a country. And I think if that problem is solved, we'll have more people doing science and AI and software engineering and all those things. So I'd like to leave on that thought.
Thank you. So it's glad to see we have a great number of audience joining with us till the end. And we will be posting the entire session at YPG YouTube channel and the web. So while we all thank to all the panelists for their extraordinary explanations, we thank all of you who has joined us throughout the event through different mediums across the globe. And we would like to invite you to visit our website and join with us in future events as well. Also, I would like to extend our thanks to Dr. Lasit Gunawardana and Mr. Kukanathan, the President of PCS, and Mr. Vajindra Kande Gamage and Mr. Alonso for their support for YPG activities, and entire Executive Council for their support to getting this YPG event going on. Thank you all.
Thank you.